Sure.
you have seen many technology shifts over the past 40
Oh yeah.
years. Like, how
Yeah.
does AI compare?
Where the difference is the pace, the
Mm,
speed. Where the risk comes in is trusting what you've asked AI to do, and it's not AI's fault. It's your fault.
Hey, everybody, welcome back to AI with Bry, the show where we're cutting through the noise and helping leaders learn, leverage, and lead with AI. I'm Brian Dunstead, and you can think of me as your chief AI officer, helping you find your path. Each week, we're bringing someone who's navigating this AI shift from the inside, not just observing it, but actually living it in their work and with their teams. Today, I am so excited to welcome David Jones to the show. And I want to be upfront with our listeners. David is one of the most compelling people I've come across lately. He spent 40 years building and leading in technology, from telephony and network connectivity all the way to running a national data center infrastructure company. This is the kind of career that gives you a very clear-eyed view of how technology actually moves and what it takes to scale something really, really big. And then he's going to tell you a little bit more about his story. But David lost his right hand and half of his forearm to a flesh-eating bacteria from a puncture wound from a rusty nail. And rather than stepping back from technology and leadership, he leaned in even harder, this time with a very deeply personal mission to advance medical technology and prosthetics to make sure that as an AI tears through this healthcare industry, the patient doesn't get left behind. So now David is involved at the Pearl here Innovation Center in Charlotte and is focused on this med tech entrepreneurship and prosthetic work, bringing his decades of experience and hard won leadership to the table. So please, again, welcome to the show, David. I'm really
Thank you.
glad you're here.
Thank you very much. Glad to be here.
I've been looking forward to this conversation. I didn't think it would happen so soon, as you said yes so quickly. So I'm glad we could carve out some time. David, you have this rare combination: 4 decades of leading technology companies and scaling, and a deeply personal lived experience inside this medical system as a patient. I want to jump right into this learn segment, but first, I'd love for you to just take us back a little. Tell us a highlight of this 40-year journey in technology and what it taught you before we get to where you are now.
Sure. Well, if you go all the way back, I have been working sort of on my memoirs, and as I looked at my history after I finished college, I went to the University of Virginia. I was immediately going to Vietnam because
Mm.
obviously I'm not a 40-year-old. And as I thought about my memoirs and my military experience, I was in the Army Signal Corps,
Mm.
which was FM radios basically.
Yeah.
But my career advanced from that into the world of telephony, which you kind of say that and say telephony because people don't get what that is these days.
Yeah.
It's kind of a whole different environment. Um, and I progressed through a couple of opportunities there. Actually, was on the regulatory side for a while. When all of this started deregulating, I saw why it needed to be deregulated.
Mm.
I got involved with a startup in the long distance side of things, and we built that and sold it to MCI. And I led a third of the company. I had no experience with sales and operations in telephony,
Hmm.
but I had a mindset that said I can figure this out, and I'm going to put everything I have into that and developing the people as a leader. And I look back at that and say it was instinctive for me.
Hmm.
I learned some of it in the Army, ironically, and how important it was to have your people have your back and trust you and your vision for what you want to accomplish and make sure they're part of it. Uh, that went on forward. We sold that business to MCI back, and that was in the early 90s. I stayed there for a while. I didn't like the big corporate environment, it just didn't fit me well. And I left there and got back into telephony for about 4 years. And um, I, I think everybody in their career has to fail one time, big time. And
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
did that.
Yeah.
I learned a lesson about managing the people I work for that takes as much effort and attention as it does taking care of the people that work for you. I didn't do a good job of that, and I learned the hard way. So I had to find another path, and I ended up getting into consulting with a friend on the West Coast, working with telephone companies and others to get into this thing called the internet.
Yeah.
My background was on networks, so I understood how it all worked. And I also had a regulatory background. So I knew what the telephone companies had to provide you as an internet provider. And I began to realize that data centers were basically a telephone company central office
Hmm.
on steroids.
Yeah.
And I had a partner, and we built a business plan around it, which I go back and look at it every now and then, and I just laugh to think what we thought we could do.
Yeah.
Ironically, we did far more than we ever thought we could do. But um, then I got to do this. Yeah, it takes a lot of capital, like you know today, and what you hear of the data center industry. Then it was about $4 million to build 10,000 square feet, basic stuff. Ping, power, and pipe is what we call it. Network, power, and cooling, basically, is what you had. So I grew that company through acquisitions and relationships actually over that period of time from 2000 on. If you fast forward on to 2017, I worked with five different private equity firms who acquired the company three times, and we're on the third one right now. I grew from nothing to really $1 billion business by
Mm.
the time I merged it with a company in Denver. And I decided at that point that I didn't really want to run this company on a national basis. I had other things I wanted to do. I was approaching 70, and I
Hmm.
said I still got a lot of mileage ahead of me, and
Yeah.
I want to do some other things. So I stepped out, stayed on the board until a year and a half ago, and then I stepped off the board as the company began to change its needs from a board perspective, and I didn't feel like I really offered that much value. But right around that same time, to transition out of that, we live on about 20 acres outside of Athens, Georgia, um, and so I manage. I love working outside, and I reached back and hit a fence gate with my back of my right hand.
Yeah.
Happened to be a rusty nail sticking through it,
Mm.
and that really, all that, going through that, completely changed my life. And basically, I got a second life in a whole new space. And I have been able to apply the things I learned over my career into this without having to learn everything all over again. It's kind of a kind of a neat situation for me. And it's really about, it has been about listening intensely to what you're hearing and the people you're working with. What are their goals and objectives? And rather than jumping into the middle of it and say, I can do this or I can do that, it's beginning to piece together something I learned a long time ago. Any business has two core things: they have to have a strategy and they have to have a structure. So often people get that reversed.
Yeah.
They
Yeah. Yeah.
come
Yeah.
up with, I'm going to hire all these people to do this without having a clear strategy. They're doomed to fail. And I use principles like that all along in everything I look at, which kind of puts me, and I don't mean this from an egotistical standpoint, but it kind of puts me in a position as someone people trust
Mm.
and are not afraid to come and ask for my advice. And
Yeah.
on the data center side, I'm constantly getting calls about what's the deal with the power, this power situation and
Yeah.
cooling and all that.
Hmm.
And I actually, right now, that industry is in the midst of a massive change for a number of reasons. Power is part of it. But I get engaged with that, and I get asked to go on boards, which I said, I said, I've got something else that I want to focus on from a
Yeah.
board perspective. I'll give you advice all day long for free because, Brian, I take the approach that God saved my life with what I went through. I won't dwell on that, but I went through sepsis, toxic shock, almost 3 months in the hospital without a medically induced coma. I was not supposed to live. Doctors that sent me to that, when I showed back up, they said, that's a miracle.
Yeah.
And I said,
Yeah.
I don't do miracles. I persevere. I have, my history has been, as a marathoner for 29 marathons, almost world class PR. But I learned from that the determination and the willpower you have to push through things
That's right.
and not screw everything up. So,
No,
um,
it's so true. You make me think of that quote from Eisenhower, right? It's like plans are worthless, but planning is everything to
that's
some
true.
degree.
That's true.
Yeah.
So
Like you, yeah.
that's kind of a fast forward through about 45 years of
Hmm.
a remark for me. I always think about it. This is remarkable. How did
Yeah.
a guy that grew up farming in tobacco farms in Southern Virginia with my family, how did this happen?
That's right.
But a lot
Well,
of the things I learned through my early years were things that I know were anchors for me in terms of
yeah.
how to deal with people and that's a big piece of everything.
Absolutely.
Yeah,
And I'm curious, like I want to like wrap up the learn segment here, but
sure.
you have seen many technology shifts over the past 40
Oh yeah,
years. Like
yeah.
how does AI compare to the other waves that you've lived through, and is this different, or does it rhyme with something you've seen before?
It's where the difference is the pace,
Mm,
the speed.
mm,
Where it's not different is when you looked at even back in the telephony days and the data center days when we went from traditional servers and routers to solid state drives.
mm.
That was dramatic. I mean, it's not the same thing, but it was dramatic. So we had to
Yeah.
retrain. We had to retrain our staff. Why? Because we dealt with a lot of customers, in that data center, and we had to be their advisor.
Yeah.
And with AI, what I'm learning, and I'm a quite a student of it for my own. One reason is it's hard to type with a hand like this,
Hmm.
unfortunately.
Yeah. Yeah.
And so I use AI as my dictation aid. I don't let it put everything in its own context. And that's where I think when I look at it, the complexity is coming in and how do you make it so that it is speaking your speak?
Yeah.
You take the advanced information because the big thing is I never before had access to this much information this quickly. I don't have to go back and do as much research. I don't have to know how to code, you know, what everybody says that these days. But being able to assess a lot of information and then summarize it and then determine how do I communicate this? Because I can pick out AI and so can most people an AI response almost immediately. And
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
and I'm more about yeah, I want AI for that information. And I think AI will drive a lot of advances, but where the risk comes in is trusting what you've asked AI to do. And it's not AI's fault. It's your fault because you're not being as specific as you need to be, second guessing what you're getting and managing that information. So what scares me about it is people take it as actual truth, and
Yeah.
it's not always that way. And we talked about that last week on the medical side of things. It goes back to the fundamental that we talked about there is the systems have to be right before you apply AI on top of it to improve it. If it's not designed correctly, you're not telling AI that it's not designed correctly. But if you
Hmm.
do, it'll probably tell you that. But you move so fast. My issue is people try to move too fast through a new technology,
Mm.
and AI forces you to do that because it's so fast.
Yeah, yeah. It's so true. I mean, it's a great starting point to this leverage segment of the show. I mean, using the dictation software is changing my work, and it's totally changing your work
Mhm.
with your prosthetic.
Yeah,
And I guess the two things to touch on in this leverage section for me are, you know, the prosthetic side. Like this has got to be just a huge area for AI that's ripe. So where do you see AI actually delivering today versus where is there still more promise than reality with some of the prosthetics? Like you've got the ability to go talk to any prosthetic company on the planet with your background.
yeah.
um how's it going? I'm curious.
Well, there are several factors related to that. And one of the biggest things for me is over the course of the last year, as I've begun to get a grip on what doesn't work well with a prosthetic and what does, there are two drivers here. The first one being from a technology standpoint. I'm beginning to see probably a half a dozen, and I focus on upper limb, obviously.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and because I do, I mean, this when I look at it, when I had my data centers, I used AI and machine learning to manage my power systems rather than taking the manual for the generator or the UPS system that says you do maintenance here, you change this. No, I use sensors to tell me
Mm-hmm.
save millions on capital expense on
Yeah.
maintenance. So when this all happened and I realized how basic this was, I said, this is AI in my arm that picks up the sensors of my muscle movement, and this is a processor. It's it's AI and machine learning. And when I look at people with an Apple Watch, I'm a Garmin guy, with an Apple Watch, and they can change their screens by doing that. What you don't realize is I can do that with my fingers I don't have. I can do so. Why can't I do that and put this hand um, into a different position? And that makes sense to me. And I am on a rampage about that because
Mm-hmm.
the technology is there. And now I'm seeing some companies now evolving using AI and different sensors. In fact, I have a whole new sensor system in my arm. If you looked in there, you'd see about 8 sensors picking up and communicating with each other to help my motion, my hand. But um, so from that perspective, I'm being pulled into that because in my quiet, subtle way, people are getting to hear, you need to talk to Dave Jones about
That's
that.
right. That's right.
And I am an advocate for a couple of locations, one being Charlotte's Arm and Hand Clinic. And I'm walking patients through what they have to face with an upper limb amputation. And because they are located, one's in Bend, Oregon, one's in Charlotte, one's in Columbia, South Carolina. I've got patients I quote help understand this, and I force them, in essence, to find out what's going on in your city about
Yeah.
this.
Yeah.
Talk to the prosthetist because the difficulty is 9% of all amputations are upper limb.
Mm.
It's not a big market.
Yeah.
And I
Yeah.
understand business really well. So you've got to be able to define where you want your emphasis to be in order to attract the investment in the software
That's
required
right.
to do it. So, that's one piece of it. The other piece, which to me is really important, and I'm involved in 2 foundations related to this. One is specifically around advancing technology. The other is around building a database of
Mm.
information, which AI is. I told somebody the other day, if AI wasn't here, we would spend months, years trying to build this database.
Mm-hmm.
The best example I could give you is we want to form a portal. My story of how I redesigned this whole thing because I was not satisfied, I can read that into it as other amputees can, and someone who's having to go through this like a dating app. I'm getting ready to do. What am I going to face? I didn't have that. I
Mm-hmm.
had to figure it all out by myself, and I did. But a lot of amputees don't have the drive and the motivation that I do. Probably fortunately for some because they would beat their head against the wall.
Yeah. 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 Yeah.
But anyway, that's the 2 areas that I really focus on is the software side of it, and that's AI,
Mm-hmm.
totally AI.
Totally.
It will take that. I use it all the time. I mean, I told you this the other day. I said when I go in there and say, great example. I love to track all my metrics, and I asked about this one particular system that said, well, it's great because you hold a sensor in each hand and it will give you the composition of your muscle
Mm.
structure, your bone density, much better than a Garmin or an Apple Watch. And I said, great. Well, would this work for me? And they said, it's AI came back. They said, it won't work for you because you
Mm.
only have one hand. I
Yeah.
said, oh, yeah, I forgot about that.
That's right.
But so, I mean, that's that piece of it. What I'm really fortunate to have is having created a lot of opportunities in my business life and realizing I always tell people this is a very simple thing. Getting from point A to point B, it's never a straight line.
That's right. Never,
And you've got to
never.
have the patience to not lose focus of where you're headed, but you've got to address the things that bounce you back and forth,
Hmm.
learn from it, so that when you get to the end, you've got an MVP. You've got a
Yeah.
really viable product that
Hmm.
works. So I don't know if
I
that
want,
answered what
no,
I wanted.
absolutely, it does. And I want to come back to the prosthetic thing a little bit, but I do have to
Yeah,
ask on the leverage side here. I saw Elon's data center chip announcement, and I just it blew my mind. Like, it was a giant shift that he's already launching 58% of the rockets worldwide,
yeah,
and now he's just going to be building the data centers and shipping them to outer space because it's free electricity and free
yeah,
cooling
yeah.
up there. I think
Yeah.
there's a lot of logistics to figure out, but what is your thoughts as the data center guy and the future of data centers?
The functionality of data centers really is fairly simple. It's a
Hmm.
utility. Basically, you in a data center, you've got to have power. If you're in an environment that is has great ambient air, you can use ambient cooling, and you don't have to run as much of your HVAC. The cost of running, when you think of what's there, um, you've got the hardware costs.
Hmm.
The power cost is divided. Really, 50% of your power cost is cooling. The other part, 50%, is running those servers, routers, cloud, everything
Yeah,
like that.
yeah, yeah, yeah.
So any deployment of a data center infrastructure not only is dependent on getting adequate utilities, you know, water, land, power, obviously, but the other piece that I'm sure he's got figured out is the network,
Mm. Yeah.
because
Well, this is
any data
Starlink.
center,
Yeah.
any data center has to have in my view, a dual high capacity fiber route to another data center.
Hmm.
It can be two cloud based data centers. It doesn't have to be. We learned that from recovery. And when we started our company, we used to have customers have to put a second set of infrastructure, say in Nashville, and they were in Charlotte, so it could fail over.
Mm. Hmm.
That gradually changed with cloud, but you still have to have that throughput capacity. The faster you can send the data, the faster you can recover it. So if you're in outer space, the only thing I don't know a lot about, and I probably will learn, is that transmission between where they are up here and where you are down here. And there's all kinds of things. Weather, I, I mean, I always make it up. I don't know all the things that can impact that. But if your network is not at capacity, I mean, at
Yeah.
home,
Yeah.
you have time, so you have latency, and you're sitting there thinking, is my internet down?
That's
I
right.
thought I was supposed to have a gigabit of internet. I actually am supposed to have that. And there are days when my wife says, something wrong with the router? I said, I don't know. I'll go reboot it.
Yeah, that's right. That's right.
And how are you going to reboot it in space? I don't
I
know.
know. I know. It's
But he's a
really, really
smart
exciting.
man, so I'm sure
He
he's got
is.
all of that figured out.
Well, if not, he'll hire the people to do it for sure. So that one just really blew my mind. I appreciate your
Yeah.
thoughts on that. And we're jumping into the last segment here, the leadership, and obviously
Mm.
this is one I'm the most curious to talk about with you, David, because your whole mission is rooted deeply in this personal experience that you went through,
Yeah.
losing your hand, and it didn't slow you down, as you said. It like redirected you towards something that most technology leaders never get close to, which actually feels like the need to need the technology that you're building, right? So
Yeah.
here's what I'm seeing across the board right now. Like, AI is moving so fast, as you said, and inside of healthcare, and the systems and institutions are struggling to keep up, right? And somewhere in the middle of all that speed is the patient experience. And is it at risk of becoming an afterthought? I mean, both in the prosthetic world and just what you saw as a patient going through what you went through.
Yeah. I'm glad you asked that way, because just recently I've had discussions with a couple of doctors, friends of mine. In fact, I was on the phone with one of them yesterday because I've gotten a sinus. I'm a little hoarse today. Had
The
a sinus.
allergies are killing me too. I
Yeah.
hear you.
I was in Atlanta helping Kennesaw State graduate students in prosthetics, advising them on how to design the socket and all that sort of stuff. And all of a sudden, it hit me yesterday. And on the way back, I called one of my best friend doctors and said, I need some heavy antibiotics
Hmm.
quickly. And he said, by the way, this orthopedic surgeon, a good friend of ours, he said, Robert was telling me that you're getting involved in medical technology. Why didn't you tell me that? And I said, well, let me tell you why. And I said, what I found out with what I went through, and I see more and more is, and we talked about AI, and I talk with these doctors about AI all the time, and they actually make appointments for me on the pretense that they want to check my heart rate or check this or that from my what I went through. In reality, we just want to sit there and talk about AI.
That's
Well,
right.
what I have come to realize, first thing, no real epiphany, but AI in healthcare, like every other environment, whether it's manufacturing or sales, whatever, using it relieves some of the mundane tasks that your employees have to deal with.
Mm.
So I thought 2 years ago with AI, I said, oh, well, that's going to give the doctor more time to spend with me. Oh,
Hmm.
no,
Mm.
no,
Yeah.
that's not what happened. They gave them more time, but they gave them more work. So now, and the expectations they're measured by from AI, it's the same thing in the business. It's business.
Hmm.
So now you got more time. I want you to see more patients. And by the way, AI is going to track. Like for me, I knew what was going on with my general purpose doctor. I walked in. I told you this story the other day. I walked in and I saw him go like that. And I said, Fred, I know what you're doing. He said, what? I said, you just turned on a timer. He said, yeah. I said, Epic is tracking how much time you spend with me because Epic also knows because of AI now that I'm a Medicare patient and you only get paid this much for this visit. I said, I get it. And I said, so it's really not helping you know more about me at all.
That's right.
I mean, it does, as I said in our panel discussion, what you see on that screen is not me.
That's right. That's
That's
right.
my metric, but it's not me. Why? Why are they what they are? You still have got to have that relationship with the person. To me, whether it's medical or business, I just mentored a partner in my son's firm yesterday, and I had that same point with him. I said, he's a guru around AI. I said, that's great, but how do you communicate with your client so you lose that contact with them? I knew I knew he was having that problem. That's why I wanted to go there. So from that perspective, where I want to see AI in patient care, and I didn't know they were doing this, but I talked to the doctor yesterday, was that getting the medical medicine. I said, why can't they give me a wearable? I have a physical coming, I don't, but I have a physical coming up in 3 months. Why can't you give me a wearable? And you know what they track?
Yeah. Yeah.
Practically
Yeah.
everything.
Hmm.
And you can get that data, take the wearable, download it to your AI, have it summarized. This is what Dave's been doing. This is how many steps he takes every day. This is how his heart rate varies every day. This is his sleep. This is VO2 max. This all the pieces. This is his stress level. It does that too.
Hmm.
And then when I walk in, he just gets AI to summarize, give me the picture of Dave Jones. So easy.
It's
But
so easy.
so Well, this is what I found out yesterday. That doctor I was talking to, he's a running buddy of mine. He's going to have a knee replacement. And he said, oh, by the way, they're going to put a sensor in that in that mechanical knee that's going to track what's going on. I said, hallelujah.
All
I didn't know they were
right.
doing that. I said, that's exactly what you need to be doing. And I said, that needs to be communicated because it's
It.
showing. I'm not pro or con, but it's going to show the medical industry and those who are trying to figure it out. there's a value of
Hmm.
AI right there,
Yeah.
as
Yeah.
opposed to AI doing operation procedures based on the information it has rather than, I mean, I know it's helpful there, but that doesn't do anything for the patient.
That's right. That's right.
And my whole thing really is about that, is how do we make this a better environment for the patient? It's great to speed up all these other things, but if you're not helping your patient, you get left in the cold.
That's right. I mean, and it's those simple things like my eye doctor growing up. I remember this to this day. He's probably been one of the best doctors I've visited. He took his little file out on me and he asked me each. I only saw him once a year. But he would write down, which grade are you in again? Oh, that's right.
Uh,
How's your
yeah,
math quiz from last year? Blah blah blah. He asked me two, three, four personal questions that just built that rapport and melted the wall and everything else. And that's not one of those questions that Epic needs to know. I mean, I love that, like, definitely get the VO2 max, get all that data in there too, but
yeah,
like ask those couple humanizing questions that just builds that connection, like we're both runners or we both like
yeah.
this kind of golf or whatever that is, on that front. So very, very well said, David. So I think, I mean, like, I'm trying to summarize this here for us. I think there's like a really strong framing here that AI in healthcare especially is only as good as the human mission behind it, right? I mean, we have to really tie that back in, and the leaders who are remembering the patient in the room are the ones that are going to get this right, to what you were saying.
You can't you can't use it for half of the application.
That's right.
And I mean, if it's mechanical, if not a person involved, it's different because you don't get the feedback. Either it blows up or or it works. And kind of in a parallel, that's what happens with the patient. If you don't use it to improve, he basically blows up. He says, "Oh, I don't need to see him. He doesn't care about me." And I went through that
Hmm.
where I was told this is going to happen to you for the rest of your life. And I said, "You don't know who I am. You don't
That's right.
know anything about me." And all they had to do was take always, in fact, these prosthetic students I was with this week, while they were working on me to build a prosthetic, I gave them the dissertation on, if you don't take
Good.
30 minutes when that your new client comes in and understand what's their lifestyle, what do they do, then you're going to lose them. They're not going to trust you. That's what it really, Brian, that's what it really boils down to for me.
Hmm.
If you don't develop that intensive listening to your other party, whether it's a patient or a business associate, you're
Hmm.
going to lose that trust.
That's right. That's right. I love it.
And
Very,
AI,
very.
yeah, AI can't do anything about that. That's up to you as an
That.
individual.
Yep, you nailed it. So I hope every medtech founder out there, every healthcare leader that's watching, listening to this, really takes what David just said to heart and carries that with them. So, David, this is the end of the show. Thank you so much for being here with us. How do people watching this or listening get in touch? What should we put down in the show notes for them to click on and get to you?
To get to me,
How
you
you
mean
what? Yeah, do you want to put the Pearl Innovation Center link in there, or what do you want to advertise in our show notes, just in
I
case
would
people
I
have
would
a
put
question?
the I would put the Pearl and really connect labs in
Okay,
Pearl because that's where I'm focused on the how do we build an entrepreneurial ecosystem there?
that's right.
How do I use, to your earlier point, the reason I got involved is they found out I had been in Charlotte for 20 years and had helped the entrepreneurial environment in Charlotte big time
Yeah.
while I was running my own company. And they said, we need someone who really understands the difficulties, complexities, and
Hmm.
challenges of this. I
Yeah.
said, well, I've been through it. I've got scars to prove it. But but yeah, let me help you with the strategy. Go back, strategy and structure, and that's where we
Yeah.
are with that. We're not ready to start the engine yet, but we are building a very intentional strategy around how we will help medtech entrepreneurs. So that's important. But as far as me, I don't know if I'm happy to give my contact information if someone needs to. I love it because people say, "How do you have time to do this?" I said, "Because I learn more than you do
That's right. That's right. Well,
every time."
I have your contact details. If you want to have them in the show notes as well, we'll do that. But you can check out wexfordconnectlabs.com/Charlotte. And
Right.
that's right inside the Pearl Innovation Center. And if you haven't checked out the Pearl Innovation Center in Charlotte, it's an amazing, beautiful space. And it is really a booming hub of healthcare innovation that's blossoming here in Charlotte. So David and I both got to be at Health Innovation Day
Yeah.
last week,
It's awesome.
which was just an amazing event. So
Yeah.
David, thank you so much for listening or being
Absolutely.
here and
I
talking with us
enjoyed it.
today. We greatly appreciate your time.
Thank you. Bye.
Hey, this has been Brian Denstead. You have been listening to AI with Bri. And remember, the future doesn't wait. Get out there and learn, leverage, and lead. We'll see you next week. This episode of AI with Bri was hosted and produced by me, Brian Denstead. Produced with help from Nancy Velasquez and Kelly Lopez. Video by Leo Moralina. Sound AI generated. Find us on all platforms at AI with Bri and visit ai.bri.net for more. Learn, leverage, lead.